Here's a question that'll get me in trouble. Do women today offer men enough? Now, some people are immediately offended that I would even ask the question, right? How dare I even suggest that our sweet, innocent angels might not offer men enough to be worthwhile? Other guys are confused why I would even ask the question, because obviously the answer is no, idiot. But there's still a bunch of guys in the middle. They're still asking this question, what should I do? Now, when you see guys talking about this, you'll see three letters pop up all the time. ROI, return on investment. Because it's not as if women don't offer men anything at all. Now, immediately, the question everyone will ask is whether or not women who offer these things still exist anymore. Because a lot of guys right now are saying that they don't. That just no modern women offer men anything worthwhile anymore, which isn't true. I managed to find one, and I personally know plenty of other guys who also managed to find one, so good ones are still out there. Which means that question is a red herring, and there are much more helpful questions that we can ask if we want to actually figure out whether the ROI balances out. But first, we do need to acknowledge the narratives that are already out there. First group of guys we have, probably the loudest, if you look down in the comments, I guarantee they're already there. The black pill guys that are like, nope, just give up. Don't bother, women are terrible. And they have a lot of reasons for that. There's super high rejection rate. Then you have all the issues created by unchecked hypergamy. Even if you do manage to snag a woman, there's a decent chance that the moment she smells a guy that might be better than you, she's gone. And when she does leave you, she has the ability to completely ruin your life. She can even destroy you just for approaching her in the wrong way. And then feminism has essentially won at this point. It's kind of hard to see why it'd be a good idea to get in a relationship with someone who wants to punish you. Then on the other side, you have your blue pill, tradcon, guys like that I interact with in my own communities who are so far removed from all of these problems. They don't think it's real. These guys over here think all of that stuff is fake news. Whenever I try to tell them about the problems that men are facing today, they look at me like you would look at a flat earther. They see me on this channel and they think I'm just Alex Jonesing it out here for attention.
I don't think you're allowed to say that anymore.
I've even been called a conspiracy theorist. That's what they think this is. Because for them, there's a lot of good stuff about it. Now, both these groups are absolutely dead set convinced that they are correct and that anyone who says otherwise is flat wrong. But the problem for each of them is the other camp exists. So the truth, whatever it is, cannot live at either of these extremes or at any point along the spectrum in between. It just can't. Because if it did, everyone would agree. Now you'll notice if you look down in the comments, a lot of people are still angry that I just said that their preferred camp isn't telling the whole truth. But that also tells us something useful. It tells us that neither of the people in these camps chose their beliefs because it made logical sense. They chose them because it made emotional sense. See, these are not explanations of what's going on. They're not assessments of the situation. These are justifications. Remember, guys right now are trying to decide, what should I do? Should I date or not? The guys in these camps have already decided what they're going to do. The black pill guys, for example, have decided that they're always going to avoid women. And these guys are in a lot of pain, right? Because they've been through a lot of really tough stuff. And that's what led them to their decision to quit. But that pain gets compounded because their own conscience knows that a man who quits while there's still hope is not a good man. That is not a strong man. The strong men rise to challenges. Cowards avoid challenges. They avoid danger. So when they make that decision to quit entirely, their own conscience beats the snot out of them, telling them, you suck. You're not a real man. It's awful to live in the brain of a person that gave up. So to quiet their mind and keep their conscience at bay, they have to believe that it was impossible all along. There was just no way to do it. And that's why black pill guys have to get so extreme in their negativity about women. They have to say that women are always the worst. They could never possibly offer you anything in return. They have to say there were zero women out there who are worthwhile. Because if there are no good women out there and it's just completely impossible to do it, then I'm not a coward. There was nothing I could do. And that's why they get so mad when anybody points out that there are still good women out there. On the other side, the trad pill guys have decided that it is almost always worthwhile to pursue women, and that's what you should do. Now, for the blue pill guys, a lot of this is because of this romantic fantasy that they depend on for emotional satisfaction.
I need it!
In order for that to work, they have to believe in the myth of the angel woman, the woman that can essentially be God for you. She can fulfill that romantic satisfaction that guys are looking for. That's why TradCon, blue pill guys, get so irrationally angry when you bring up all the problems that young men are facing today, all the stuff that women are doing that's not good. Because for them, it breaks the illusion of this romantic fantasy. Now, the reason why all of this is helpful to know is because, one, it tells us we don't want to get sucked into someone else's emotional trap. We want to find the truth. But the truth isn't a universal truth that's just true for everyone all the time. It's not universal, it's conditional. Yes, it is worth it if, or no, it's not worth it if. That means we have some hope. Because if you really want it to work, if you want that relationship, it's not about figuring out which of these camps you should get in and just take the pill and turn your brain off. It's about figuring out which conditions actually make sense to date in. And I thought about just breaking down the pros and cons of a whole bunch of different scenarios, but I got bored. So yeah, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I think there's a more interesting question we can ask that streamlines this and gets us to the conditions that matter. And the question is this: how can you have two groups of guys interact with the same thing and come away with a completely different perspective on it? Well, there's three possibilities. One, they're not interacting with the same thing, even though it looks the same. Two, they're thinking about it differently. They're processing it or seeing it differently. Or three, they're interacting with it differently, right? Different actions get different results. Now, these three questions, I think, give us a pretty good blueprint for figuring out which conditions matter. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to give you a cheat code that has helped a lot of guys, myself included, get past a lot of the problems and roadblocks that we're about to run into as we go through this. So let's start with this first one. Are guys interacting with the same thing? No, they're not. Different women are, wait for it, different. Now, some of the ways that matter are, you've probably seen like Homath with his different social development levels. A person who hasn't developed past seeing their own wants and needs is probably not going to be a very good person to be with. Then there's spiritual development, right? This is one that a lot of guys will say, it doesn't matter if you're Christian or not. Girls are all the same. Christian girls will treat you terrible too. But in the same way that the social development levels matter, the level of your spiritual growth and spiritual development matters, right? A lot of people who call themselves Christians stay at the basement floor and just stagnate. Another thing that matters is your cultural background, your family of origin. This determines a lot of your morality, right? What seems right and wrong to you. And these are all factors that are very different from woman to woman. So what's the ideal that we're looking for with these three factors, and how can we find it? Well, there's two questions we need to ask with this. Who are you looking for, and where are you looking, right? A lot of guys are not looking at the right people right now, and they're not looking in very good places. So let's see if we can define the type of person who will give you the best chance. First of all, step one, never date a liberal woman. Most all liberals today follow the narrative that it's right and good to punish men for existing as a part of the patriarchy. If you enter a relationship with someone who has any hint of this mindset, it will eventually be a disaster, no matter how sweet things start off. I also highly recommend never dating anyone who's a non-Christian, right? Just, this is basic logic. Don't be unequally yoked. Now, we have to be honest right here. This does mean that most women are not marryable, because most women vote liberal and most are not Christians. So the majority of women are not safe people to be with, and they're not going to make a decent, loving wife. Unfortunately, that means there will not be enough good women to go around for all the men who are looking. But again, that doesn't mean you should just give up. It does mean that you'll have to look harder, and you will have to work harder to get a good woman's attention, which sucks. But hey, deal with it. Not to get too cheesy about it, but I genuinely believe that you can. So who are you looking for? Well, you want a woman who is conservative. The things you're looking for are, how does she feel about being in control of the situation? Does she need to be the one in charge? Is she constantly pulling the reins of authority out of the man's hands? There's ways you can look for this. Is she always trying to change your plans or shoot down your ideas? Probably not a good sign. The other super important thing is respect. Does she actually show respect and deference? If she's combative and standoffish and disagreeable, probably not a good sign either. At least while you're dating or while you're considering a partner, look for agreeableness, right? Another part of our question of who is, you need to prioritize character. Deprioritize looks and how you feel around it, the emotions that you get, all the butterflies and all that. Heavily prioritize character. I had a guy ask me recently, hey, there's this girl that she's interested in me and she's a good human being, but I'm not super attracted to her. Should I go ahead with this anyway? And what I responded with is basically, first of all, prioritize character, but second of all, are you attracted enough, right? And in other words, to put it in kind of a crass way, are you capable of being intimate with her? That's kind of enough. If she's attractive enough to you, and part of this is, your relationship with porn. If you've been watching too much porn, your standards for attractiveness might be out of your reach. And that's not her fault. But if she's attractive enough, then don't worry about it. Instead, take your focus off of the way she looks and focus on character. The other important thing to look for is, can she disagree with her instincts and say no to them? That's an incredibly valuable thing. Prioritize those things at all costs, even if it means going with someone who's less attractive, so long as she's attractive enough that you can be intimate with her. Okay, last thing to consider in our question of who, she needs to have a strong relationship with Jesus. It does not give you a guarantee that she's going to be perfectly trustworthy and treat you well all the time, because she's still a human being that has sin nature. We all do. Some guys will say, oh, you're naive, your head's stuck in the sand. Christian women aren't any better, they'll leave you all the same. And yes, there are some stories out there of Christian women leaving their husbands for unbiblical reasons or for selfish reasons. I've seen it happen. But in the communities that I've been a part of, right, churches that teach the Bible, it's been like 4 or 5 guys out of the 3,000 that I've come in contact with. It's an insanely small percentage compared to the rest of the world. So no, averages aren't promises. There's no guarantee that it's going to be perfectly safe. But if you find a woman that has a genuine relationship with God, your chances are way better than anywhere else. The important thing to look for here is whether or not Christianity is a set of activities to her, right? I give God my time and attention to do the churchy stuff, and he gives me the eternal hall pass for anything I do wrong. That's called moral therapeutic deism. That is not a real Christian. That's not someone who's actually following Jesus. I listen to Bethel and I take notes during the sermon doesn't automatically mean that she has a relationship with the person of God. That's what you need to look for. And the biggest thing to look for that is, does she follow his commands on a daily basis? Is she trying to? Is she looking for ways that she can please God? Because a woman who obeys Jesus will be most likely to respect you, and she'll be least likely to betray you. So if we put all these things together, this gives us the best conditions possible to get a good ROI. It reduces the risks as low as they'll go, and it gives you the best chance at finding a woman who has good things to offer. And the other question to ask is, where? Where do we look? Right? Because a lot of guys are looking in exactly the worst places they could possibly look, right? They're looking online, on social media, at the hottest girls that are getting all the attention from all the guys all the time, or on dating apps, or shallow churches that don't actually teach what Jesus said. So what are some decent places to look? I can sometimes recommend shared activity groups. It's an archery group or a game night group or something like that. Another thing that you kind of have to be careful with is friends. The more you can expand your friend circle, the more opportunities you're going to have. You're going to meet new people through people. You do have to be careful because sometimes your friends will have agendas. But I do know plenty of people who've met their spouse through friends. At the end of the day, the only place I can really trust is a church that actually teaches and adheres to the Bible. I know that's not going to make everybody super happy. I'm just saying we're looking for what works. And this is another thing that gives us the best conditions to succeed. Next up on our list of conditions is mindset. We're just going to focus on one question that I think really gets at the heart of the issue. And that is, what's your purpose for this relationship? What do you want this for? I'm kind of shocked that this is just not a question that people ask. Nobody thinks about why you want a relationship before they dive into it. I mean, I didn't for the first 30 years of my life. I mean, mostly because I thought the answer was obvious, right? I felt things, She made me feel feelings, and I wanted to feel those things all the time. So I figured if I could get her to stick around with me, then I would get to feel the ways I wanted to feel. And that's what the relationship was for. What else would it be for? Of course, I knew the technical theological answers, children and companionship and all that stuff. But functionally, the only reason I cared about was how I felt and what I wanted. Now, first of all, we have to acknowledge that that is not wrong. Feelings are a good thing. Romantic love and attraction can be a healthy gift from God. Just read Song of Solomon. It's part of God's design for relationships. Feelings are also very strong motivators. They push us to do things that we otherwise wouldn't do. In fact, you could actually argue that they're behind everything we do, but that's a different video. But the point is, this is the thing that most guys are thinking about when they're considering whether or not it's worth it, whether or not women offer something that's worth the risk and the cost. Do I get to feel the things that I want to feel in return for all of that? But as good as feelings can be, what happens when you make feelings the main purpose of the relationship? And for that, we got to do a little story time. Be me for the first 15, 20 years of my dating career. I had these feelings really just driving me. You have to do this. You have to seek a woman. You cannot be single. I was miserable. If I didn't have that woman in my life that made me feel those feelings, then what's the point of being here on this planet? This is just a bunch of suffering and sucky crap all the time. What else could possibly make it worth it? And so I'd meet a girl, daydream about her and how she was going to treat me and how she'd be so amazing to me and make me feel all these super good things before we even really talked very much. And so I show up to our first few dates. I'm already putting a ton of weight on her emotionally. I'm super nervous. I'm basically at the mercy of how I feel. And it would play out one of a few ways. Either she would reject me outright because I'm putting so much onto her. I'm so nervous that, it's an ick to her. And she goes, ew, this is gross. I don't feel good about this. Or we'd get into a relationship. And after a few weeks, she'd go from being really, really super interested and liking me a lot to being confused. And I don't know if I want this. You're a great guy and I like you as an option, but I don't want to commit to you. Until eventually she'd just be like, you know what? I'm sorry, I can't do this. Or a couple of times I got into a relationship and I'd be like, hey, this is great for a little bit. But then reality would come crashing in. And this person I had imagined her to be, she didn't treat me like that. She didn't anticipate my wants and needs and say all the things that I wanted to hear from her. It broke the illusion, right? That romantic fantasy that I was after. From there, it turned into resentment. I was like, man, I'm in this relationship, but I'm not feeling the things that I need to feel. And so now she's keeping me from potentially being with someone else who could make me feel those things. So now I start to resent the relationship and resent her a little bit. And I'm like, oh, this isn't good. The novelty's worn off and now I want out. And so I did. I would break up with her. So basically, every time I approached women when feelings were the purpose of it, it just didn't work. I couldn't make it last. Because for one thing, when you approach women with a ton of emotional need, that is woman repellent. They can't stand it. It's like bug spray, but for girls. So it ends up being very rare that you can convince a woman to go out with you. The second problem is it eventually wears off. Some fun facts about emotions. Most of what we're feeling is actually a dopamine chase. We're after a chemical hit. A lot of people think that dopamine is the pleasure chemical. It's not. It's the pursuit chemical. You get the good feelings while you're chasing something, not once you've gotten it. Once you receive the thing, the chemical dissipates or you return to your baseline. That's the other fun thing about your feelings is happy people tend to stay happy. They have a baseline of that's just how they are. Unhappy or depressed people tend to always return to their normal baseline. On average, this is actually some Jonathan Haidt talks about this in his books. He actually suggests that even though the data says married people are happier, that it's not a causal relationship. Married people aren't happier because they got married. Married people are happier because naturally happy people get married more often, right? They're more attractive, and so they're more likely to be desirable. But the problem is, once you return to that baseline, you end up with this situation where you either resent the person that you're with for preventing you. They're the barrier. Now, instead of the person that's giving you the feelings that you want, they're the thing in the way. And so you begin to resent them and you want out of the relationship. The other thing that happens is you hit this wall of despair, because this keeps happening to you. Every time you're in a relationship, you always return to your emotional baseline of whatever you were before. If you were an unhappy single person, you end up being an unhappy married person or an unhappy dating person. So when the reality that, no, this person can't fulfill me and make me feel these things, when that comes crashing in, you end up in this place of despair, because now, well, what hope do I ever have to be emotionally satisfied? The other problem you run into is when emotions are the purpose for the relationship, emotions end up in charge, right? You end up completely subjugated to them. You have to do what your feelings tell you to do, or else you are not okay. And let's do a little thought experiment with this. Let's say we try to view our emotions as characters, treat them as if they were a person. Imagine you have this character who comes in and just kicks down your door and says, hey, you have to give me this thing that I want. I want you to go get this woman who's going to make you feel all these feelings, or else I'm going to make your life miserable. I'm going to make you not even want to exist anymore. How would you characterize that type of person? Well, first of all, you'd probably be like, man, that's abusive. And that's manipulative. That's coercive. You're leveraging a person and threatening them to get what you want from them, right? And we would call that kind of person a tyrant. Right? That is not a benevolent ruler. And yet we bend our knee to the way that we feel and our emotions without questioning it every single day. They say jump, we say how high. Whatever our feelings tell us to do, most of the time, we just do it. We don't even question it. And if we fail at it, we just let those feelings make us miserable instead of questioning them, challenging them. Hey, being like, hey, hold up a second. I don't agree with you. So what we see is that emotions make excellent servants, right? They make life more enjoyable and they're great as motivators, but they make terrible masters. When we're the ones serving them, life sucks. So we may have kind of reached a dead end with this way of framing it. If emotions are the purpose, it's probably not going to play out the way that we want it to, at least not in the long term for most people. But what are some other reasons why you might want a relationship? Well, you could try to do the stoic thing, shut your feelings off and just go for utility. This is what most marriages were throughout human history. They were not marriages for feelings. They were marriages for, surviving a harsh winter. So what are some utilities that you could put your focus on? Well, there's the old school way of looking at it: cooking, cleaning, running the household. Today, that's not super appealing to most guys because they just don't need that. That is not worth the stress and the hassle of relationships, because they can cook their own food. They can do their own laundry. Anything else they need, they can get on Amazon Prime. But then we have some potential modern utilities for relationships that a lot of people look to today. And things like, sharing the cost of living. It's extremely expensive to survive these days. That is a significant benefit of being married. Definitely makes life cheaper. There's also social capital, especially among Christian communities. You're kind of treated like a third-class citizen if you're not married. I hear guys talking about this. This is one of the reasons guys list that they actually do want to get married, so that people finally respect them and they can actually interact with most of the crowd at their church. And then there's the personal development aspect of it. It's one of the potential tools that God uses to sanctify us and make us more like Him. And if you go this route, it also makes it easier for you to focus on stuff that really matters. If you're locked into feelings and how you feel and whether or not you get the butterflies and she's attractive enough, that will steer you towards women whose character might not be the best. If you just focus on utilities, that opens up a lot of possibilities for people you might not have considered before. But we got to look at how this plays out. How does this typically go down if you make utility the main purpose of a relationship? And this is also still pretty rare. There's not a whole lot of women out there who want that kind of relationship. Then you have the problem of comparison, right? You're going to be around other people who actually are happy in their relationships. They do have some of that romantic satisfaction. And you look at that and go, man, I wish I had that. And that's the biggest problem, is that if it's just for utility, it's not very satisfying. So you run into all these things, you run into these problems, and you start wanting what you want. And so the elephant wins, and you end up wanting out of that relationship. And so we end up with another potential dead end. Let's try on one more purpose though. And this is the only one that I've had success with an asterisk. We'll come back to that. What if your purpose is a giving purpose instead of a taking purpose? Your goal is to make someone else's life better. The happiest people on the planet are typically focused on other people, not themselves. They're looking more for what they can give than what they can get. It really is more blessed to give than to receive. With my wife, I try to make my purpose improving her life, make her life better today than it was yesterday, and bringing her closer to God, because I believe that that's the best thing that a person can have. The closer they are to God, the happier, more peaceful, and healthier they can be, the more satisfied they'll be. So in my experience, this gives you the best possible conditions to succeed and actually make things worth it. With an asterisk, because there's some potential problems with this approach. Again, we talk about the baseline thing. If you're not an emotionally satisfied person going into this, this isn't going to fill you enough to make it worth it necessarily. For some people, right, it is, but for a lot of people, this just isn't appealing. It just doesn't look tasty emotionally. Most guys, again, they want the relationship because of that hunger for romantic satisfaction. This approach isn't necessarily going to fill that by itself, right? If you're an emotionally empty person, having a giving mindset isn't necessarily going to fix you or make it better. It might help, but you're still going to struggle in your relationship. And so this can sometimes be a dead end for guys. Now, there's asterisks here because there's an exception to this that we'll come back to in a little bit. But we've got one more set of conditions we need to look at first, and that is your actions. How do you interact with women? Different actions get different results, and that's doubly true with women because they're not typically as proactive as the feminist movement would like to portray most women, right? In real life, most women are not initiators. If a woman is taking charge of something, she's usually not very happy about it, right? It's not a pleasant experience because probably in her mind, the guy that was supposed to take charge didn't, and she's not happy about it. Most women are also highly reactive. They're not proactive. They react to what we do, how we lead, how we present ourselves, how we interact with our friends, how successful the achievements that we attain. They react to stuff. And we as guys are one of those things in their environment that they react to. So our outcomes in the dating world are mostly the results of our choices and actions. Now, I understand there's a lot of guys who don't want to hear this, right? Many guys skip past the red pill and go straight for the black pill because if you've been abused by a woman or you've been divorced or rejected constantly and you've just been treated terribly, it's not fun to hear about how reactive women are. It's much easier to believe that, no, it's just a character issue on her side. I mean, I can't accept the possibility that I might have done things differently and gotten a different result. Now, I'm not saying any of this to victim blame or to shame anybody or to kick guys while they're down. That's not my goal here. Because it doesn't matter what you did. There is no sin that justifies another sin. None of what you do excuses her sin. All I'm trying to say is that this is stuff that's not outside of our influence. We have the ability to steer these situations with the way that we act. So this isn't a negative thing about the past and the stuff that's happened before. That's all done, over with, gone. Can't go back and change it. This is a positive thing for guys in the future because it means you're not stuck. You can change your situation. You can get better results, right? People who take responsibility for the outcomes that they get, on average, tend to do better in life than people who view life as being out of their control. Now, we do have to remember that women do have a sinful flesh, right? That's going to pull them towards evil. It doesn't matter if she is a model Christian and she loves Jesus. All of us have a desire to sin. We also have to be aware that for her, attraction instincts are the same as survival instincts. So she needs to feel safe. If we act in a way that makes her feel insecure or unstable or unsafe, her survival instincts are going to kick in. She's not going to find us attractive or desirable. And in fact, she's probably going to want to get away from us. And she's probably not going to treat us very well. Again, that doesn't excuse it, but that's just a part of the way that she's wired to react to us. And so the more you're aware of it, the more you can navigate it better. And she's going to follow your lead. If you're a frustrated, angry, depressed person, she's going to follow that and react to that. If you're an outward flowing, giving, unselfish person, she'll probably react to that as well. You lead well and she will follow you well. You think of it kind of like she's a cat, right? We have a cat, super sweet, nice, very loving cat. Oh, speaking of cat, there she is right there. I don't know if you can see her. She's just down there. Hi. It's Momo. Except when you try to pet her from the wrong angle. If you cross her face the wrong way when you're trying to pet her, she'll bite you. She's reacting to the way that I treat her, kind of like a woman. I mean, it doesn't excuse the fact that she bit me, but it does mean that it's in my control to a degree. Right? I can learn how to approach her in a way that doesn't make her uncomfortable. It can be helpful to think of yourself like a head coach. We don't like head coaches who throw their players under the bus during a loss, even when it was the players who screwed up, right? The coaches who take responsibility and say, you know what? It's on me. I got to coach them better. We like those coaches more. We trust them. We respect them more. And their players do too. Coaches who don't take responsibility and say, it wasn't my fault, it was the players who just sucked, they don't win a lot of games and they don't last very long. But coaches who take responsibility, take accountability and say, you know what? It doesn't matter if the player was the one that missed that play. I'm the one in charge of this operation. I'm the one responsible. And so I need to do better first, right? Guys who take that mindset and mentality to it tend to get better outcomes. So how can we do that? I'm just going to give you the 30-second overview. You want to become an outward flowing person instead of an inward sucking person. People aren't going to react well to you if you're seeking to get instead of to give. You also need to manage frame well, learn how to spot the premise of the conversation and manage it. A lot of times that's going to mean you need to be strong instead of just being nice and agreeable, right? Become the kind of guy who can protect, provide, and lead well. One of the things you're protecting her from is her own sinful flesh, right? You want to avoid behaviors that will entice her to sin or make her feel unsafe or insecure. The more you protect her from sin, the more you protect yourself from being sinned against. And that goes back to bringing her closer to God. Some of the don'ts: don't ever try to negotiate for attraction, right? No nice guy coins. You do not want to try to purchase her affection. If you want attraction, you need to become the thing the other person wants. There's no other way to do it, right? Again, don't suck. You don't want to be an inward flowing person. You want to be an outward flowing person, and never skip the work, right? If you skip the work and don't become the kind of guy who does this stuff naturally, it's not going to work. And that's going to be a dead end for some guys. But for a lot of other guys, this is what will put you in the best conditions to succeed. Now, there's an asterisk next to these and, all these dead ends and problems that we have, because we have to ask, is this enough to make it worth it? Or are you enough for yourself? Now, this is, of course, subjective. But after all that stuff we went through, does this make it so that women offer enough? The answer is no, for most guys, right? The ROI still isn't there. You can get a lot back for it, but it takes so much effort and there still is a decent amount of risk there. But at the same time, this is also a no. No, they don't feel like they're enough on their own. So even though relationships aren't worth it to them, they're not happy about it. And so for the guys that aren't happy about it and you want to do something about it, I have a cheat code. Now, I'm usually against shortcuts, but this isn't as much of a shortcut as it's going to sound like. And a lot of guys are going to say, oh, no, this is absolutely not for me. That's okay. It's worked for me. Now, I call this cheat code stuffing the elephant. Remember the elephant we talked about? He's hungry all the time. He has these things that he wants and he's kind of a tyrant. Right? He's a bully. He's bigger and stronger than our cognitive brain. And if we're going to make any progress in changing our life, changing the way that we interact with women, we have to change the elephant somehow. Because the elephant, above all else, wants security, satisfaction, and validation. And it's ravenously hungry for those things all the time. And so if you want any hope of changing the elephant's course, you have to get these things satisfied with some kind of emotional energy source. Now, when you try to plug women into this emotional energy source spot, you end up with a catastrophe because she needs more than she can give most of the time. You end up with this emotional drain situation where you end up hungrier than you were when you started. And then you end up with resentment towards her because she didn't give you enough of what you were looking for. And you probably both resent each other. And it turns into this feedback loop where it's like two vampires sucking on each other's necks until they die of starvation. I'm pretty convinced this is at the root of most divorces. So if you want to prevent this feedback loop problem, you have to find some other kind of emotional energy source. And a lot of guys turn towards their job or their role in life. Now, this has some positives to it. It can be emotionally fulfilling and validating. You do feel better in life when you have meaning and purpose. But it also has some drawbacks because it's not entirely secure. What happens when you lose that job or you get injured and you can't fulfill that meaningful role anymore? It can also end up damaging relationships because you end up too distracted or you put too much weight on those things or those people that have become your purpose for life. This happens a lot with children, and it ends up pushing those relationships away and you lose them. So this is better than seeking validation and emotional satisfaction from a woman primarily, but it's not entirely ideal and it's not the cheat code. What if we plug our emotional hunger and need into a higher source? My hunger for satisfaction is infinite. Literally, it has no bounds. So to be satisfied enough, I need something infinite. I also need something that's more secure and stable than those other things. And that is exactly what God offers. When we're emotionally hungry and we don't go to God for satisfaction, we tend to put our desires in the wrong order. We go to women first for satisfaction and earthly pleasures and achievements and things like meaning and purpose and giving to others and seeking God. Those things work their way down the order. And we put the most weight on the things that offer the least help. And it ends up totally broken. But, and this is the cheat code, if we go to our God when we're hungry, he says, seek and you will find. Taste and see that the Lord is good. So we get the satisfaction that we're looking for. And when that happens, it changes what the elephant wants. It changes the direction of our desires. Where before we couldn't possibly live in a world where we were single for the rest of our life. You end up finding that's just not a thing that's as big a deal. It's not the most important thing. When you're satisfied by God, you want to seek him more. You want to build his kingdom more. So you want to give to others more. You want meaning and purpose in your life. So earthly satisfaction is not as big a deal to you. And you don't seek to get from women quite as much. You seek to give to women. And a really strange Twilight Zone thing starts to happen when you reach this point. If you get satisfied by your creator, you order your desires properly, and you combine this with all those best conditions and practices that we just talked about, a weird thing starts to happen. You actually start to get those things that you wanted before. So now that you're satisfied by God, you become this outward flowing person, you become attractive to other people, and the things that you want start showing up in your life anyway. You're able to actually get that affection from a woman that you wanted and that validation as well. That romantic satisfaction you're looking for starts to show up in your life. It's okay to want these things, but when you order your desires in a healthy way and God is at the top and he's the one satisfying you, you actually start to receive the things that you wanted the most before. Now, guys, this is an absolute cheat code. This completely turned my life around. I mean, yes, it's hard work. You still have to do the work and become that guy. And you have to make sacrifices. You have to surrender your life to Jesus genuinely. Seek him, put him first. And for a lot of guys, that's the exit door, right? That is, don't want to do it. I'm out. And that's okay. But for the guys that do this, I at least found the stuff that I gave up for it was nothing compared to the rewards that I got. So, are modern women worth dating and marrying anymore? The answer I found is yes, if. All right, my cat is going nuts right now, and it's getting late, and I have to get up early tomorrow, so you're on your own. Stay weird, and go watch another video. See you guys.